Hiya, I've got two reads today, and both of them are kind of swoopy reads. I will explain what I mean by swoopy. They're both reads, I think, that I got a bit of lift off. I went on a rocket ride, and for entirely different reasons. I will explain. The first one is The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley, and this is a debut novel, an absolute humdinger. Totally loved it. One of those mixed genre novels, and kind of, I think I liked the experiment of that, in that there's a lot of everything going on, and it's sort of mashed up, sci-fi, spy, thriller. There's a murder in it. There's a comedy of errors. Absolutely all the things you could think of, and a very nice romance. So, and all in this blindingly sharp, funny, laugh out loud prose. We're set in probably contemporary London, but possibly also a little bit sort of speculatively, a bit further down the track, because obviously further down the track we're able to extract people from history and bring them back via time travel. So that's possibly not contemporary. The main narrator, or the main narrator, is an unnamed woman who has been hired, or has been accepted into the post of a bridge at the Ministry of Time. Now, what is a bridge? Well, a bridge is someone who literally creates a cultural connection between someone who might have lived their life back in the 19th century, the early 19th century, and then being whooshed straight into our current century, might not know what the heck was going on, quite probably, as is the case with the extracted historical figure who she has to live with and guide through contemporary society. And he is a young naval officer who was on the doomed Franklin expedition in the Arctic in the 19th century, and his name's Graham Gore. Historical figure actually exists, and this is just Bradley's version. There are other figures. There are 4 or 5 that we concentrate on the story, because they all, at different points in the story, meet up and get to know each other, because this could only be positive. Interestingly, they're from all walks of life and of all sexual persuasions, which makes this a kind of a monumental read on that level, not just because we're dealing with attitudes to through time to queerness, but we're also dealing with the idea through time travel, which is involuntary. These are people that are just whisked back, whether they liked it or not. So you're dealing with kind of those ideas of colonialism and sort of refugee ism. I can't really tell you any more of what goes on in the novel, but obviously you can work it out for yourself, that if you have a modern young woman who smokes her cigarettes and does life, you're also going to get someone from the mid 1800s is going to look at her, that behavior, and say, holy camellia, that's not the women I'm used to. And the adjustment is going to be very, very, very tricky. And there are very many tricky exchanges between these two in particular, and then exchanges between other bridges and their expats, and how all of this, these tensions, particularly in our couple with Graham Gore and our narrator, is how those tensions sort of morph into attraction and romance that may or may not ever come off. Who knows? I'm not going to tell you. It's one of those almost indescribable, it doesn't fit into a category, because you do have it has a James Bond, because there are deaths and murders, there are strange hovering villains, there are mad races across London. There you sort of get James Bond meets meets Doctor Who, meets Jane Austen, meets the biggest time warp green globe hole in the fabric of the universe, one of those novels. Everything in it. Laugh out loud funny, great dialogue, great thinking going on about colonialism, about queerness, about, but also just great blooming fun. It's just a big fizz of a novel. Great fun. Absolutely, highly, highly recommend. But, it is a bit mental in places, so be prepared. Go in with the openest mind you can possibly imagine or can possibly conceive of. Next, also a novel that kind of lifted me off, firm ground and sort of whooshed me off into other territory is Sarah Perry's Enlightenment, which, we're in that sort of territory of the known and the unknown, of certainty and uncertainty, and of what is knowable, and what is sort of almost science fiction. In if we don't understand something, then how do we perceive it? What do we call it? Perry's written two other novels, The Essex Serpent and Melmoth, which both work on this kind of territory of what is the supernatural, where do science and faith intersect, and how can you hold those two things and believe in both of them? How can you do that without complete and utter cognitive dissonance? Which is very much a modern thing. In it, we have a main character called Thomas Hart, who is one of the loveliest characters that I've read in a while, full of all his flaws and his self-doubt and his self-hatred in places, and his self-castigation. He's lovely, and I'd love to have met a real Thomas Hart, I think, just for the conversations. Highly intelligent, writes for an Essex local newspaper, which is, Sarah Perry writes often into Essex. This is her stomping ground. And you learn that his sexual tendency is homosexual, that he, just goes off to London to keep all of that away from the eyes of his church community, maybe, but also that he can kind of sort of separate himself into that part of his life there and this part of his life here. And you know that this is an immense sorrow, that this is a hard thing for him. And there's certain characters who you think might be aware of this and other characters that don't. And he does meet someone who's the curator of a local museum while they're interested in unearthing the history of a certain Maria Vajiva who had lived in a local grand house, who was an astronomer who may or may not have been the first person to discover a comet, and we uncover all of the different clues towards, was this ever known, and what became of her, because she kind of just vanished. And there's some papers, and where are they, and how do we find them? So there is this kind of paper trail going through. And this museum curator is someone that Thomas falls for. And is that reciprocated? And what is reciprocated love? Is that love? Absolutely gorgeous writing on human relationships, because of this chapel that Thomas attends. So he's got this war going on between his faith and how he fits into his faith as someone who would be sort of put aside by the church for being sinful. How he kind of also has to get that to lock into what are the heavens and what are the stars and what is celestial. And how do we know any of that? Well, how much of that is real? And another young person in the congregation of this Bethesda Baptist, and we're in the 1990s, so this isn't, the congregation has been going for a while, but this young Grace Macaulay is someone that he has known since she was a baby. And she grows up, half the time completely believing that she needs to be loved by God and all that, but half the time aware that he mightn't be there, and that there may be other things. And she meets a young man, and how is all of that going to work out if she's quite so wild and different, and she wears homemade clothes, and she's just doesn't fit into her society. So we're working a lot on these marginalized members of the community, vagrants, queer, religious sort of small congregations that aren't mainstream. And Perry casts a light on those, which is very tender and very delicate. And I really, really enjoyed this book for that. But I mean, Thomas, we follow him right through as he grows older, and as the tensions between what did he do to Grace? What were decisions he made over other people's lives and for himself? And what is love? How is it unrequited? What is loving God? How does that fit in with knowing that, who made the stars, and what stories are we prepared to believe? It goes right down into sort of quantum physics. Also nicely done is that all the way through this, we watch Thomas's columns in the local paper as his own thinking follows a natural course. And, what do we come down to at the end is the miracle of life and love. It's an absolutely gorgeous read. Highly, 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 highly recommend. That's it from me. See you next time.